Welcome, listeners, to episode 2 of Island Echoes. If this is your first time listening, be sure to check out episode 1, where we chatted with the contributors to the Rising Tides report released a couple months back. If you're a returning listener, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time to tune in. On this episode, we're going to be discussing the Wetlands Thrive, Life Survives campaign by Sustainable Cayman. Soleil, what do the wetlands mean to you?
That's a great question, Al. To me, when I think about our island, wetlands mean everything. They provide so many services to our island, and worldwide as well. Here on island, they help keep us cool and hydrated by creating our local weather patterns, and keep us safe and secure by acting as a natural barrier for storms. They're also the habitat for many of our critters, like the Cayman parrot, and many of our aquatic species like stingrays.
That is so true. For me, the wetlands play such a vital part in our maritime heritage and culture, and looking back into our past, our diet consisted mostly of seafood due to the accessibility of sailors going out to the sea, and not including the difficulty of farming on land, aside from a couple of provisions. You get your yam, cassava, and all that stuff. And maintaining this healthy balance in our wetland ecosystem is why we can enjoy the continued tradition of fishing today. And understanding that our wetlands serve as a nursery where a wide range of marine species are born.
Absolutely, Al. And speaking of maintaining balance, we have a returning guest from our first episode, Hayley Roulstone, who's here to provide more details on the campaign and what it's about. Hayley, do you want to reintroduce yourself for everyone?
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for having me again. It's so nice to be back. I'm the campaign support officer for Wetlands Thrive, Life Survives at Sustainable Cayman.
Lovely. So, getting into our topic for today, what is the goal of the Wetlands Thrive, Life Survives campaign?
So, our main goal of the Wetlands Thrive, Life Survives campaign is to educate the public about the alternative routes being considered for the East West Arterial road extension, and to encourage their participation in the EIA public consultation. In order for the road to be beneficial to everyone, we need to hear from everyone. So that's the main goal of our campaign, to just hear from the public and kind of see where the majority are at, where there are other differing opinions. We want to hear it all.
Right, of course. I do feel like when it comes to planning in Cayman, it is quite difficult because there's so many things going on at a time. You can really miss that consultation, the public consultation for things. No matter how you feel about something, it's always hard to catch it.
Absolutely.
So Hayley, can you explain exactly what is a central mangrove wetland?
Absolutely. So I could explain a little bit. The Central Mangrove Wetlands is a large continuous mangrove forest that extends from Hurley's to kind of near the Mastic Trail. It spans over 30% of the island's entire land area, and it's approximately 35 square kilometers. In the Central Mangrove Wetlands, there are mangroves and other plants that form habitat for thousands of birds and other wildlife. Approximately 1,500 acres of the Central Mangrove Wetlands is protected through the Marine Parks Law, and another 1,032 acres is a part of the National Trust's land.
Wow, that's a lot of land, and also not a lot of land protected. So Definitely interesting for people to know, because I think when we look at this big chunk of trees, we just assume that, well, at least I would assume that it's all protected since it's such a useful area.
Yeah, not only that, but as we mentioned before, the mangroves is this huge ecosystem and biome that's home to so many of our endemic and native flora and fauna that is so special and distinct to Cayman. And the thought of any of that being disrupted, almost what's the word? I'm having a mental mental brain freeze right now. Matt, you can keep this in if you want. This disruption to this ecosystem in Cayman is not only impacting the wildlife and flora, but it's also affecting our cultural identity and what makes Cayman so unique compared to the other Caribbean islands in the Caribbean region.
Yeah, even like globally, islands are the area with the highest amount of biodiversity, since they develop separately from other land masses. So losing these creatures would be a really big loss for the whole world at the end of the day, since it's so special. So I guess we kind of covered a little bit of why the central mangrove wetland is important environmentally, culturally, socially, economically, literally all of the reasons it's important. But if you want to go a little bit more into that and how these areas are interconnected, that would be great.
I just wanted to add on to the other sentiments about the biodiversity of the mangroves. I don't think I mentioned, but it is the largest continuous mangrove forest in the Caribbean region. And so that means it has a really high level of biodiversity. And it meets the criteria to be an internationally recognized important bird area due to its value to local and migratory birds. So, for example, it hosts, or I guess it is the habitat for the Cayman parrot, which is the national bird of the Cayman Islands. So it's a critical habitat for the parrots, and it's a critical habitat for the West Indian whistling duck, which is near threatened on the endangered species criteria. So it's just really teeming with life, both above and below, because for those that aren't familiar with mangroves, they live kind of submerged partially in the water. So there's not only a large amount of biodiversity for the birds and other terrestrial life, but it's also highly biodiverse for aquatic species such as fish and crabs.
Yeah, some of these people, they love going crabbing. So think about it. Any disruption to the mangroves is gonna disrupt the, I guess, the heritage and culture that, you go with your aunt, your uncle, your grandmother, whatever, inside the road and go crabbing. So if you want to keep these things going, keep these traditions alive, like, these things are so interconnected to who we are, how we live, and nature is a big part of that.
Yeah, and like you said, how we have the largest continuous mangrove wetland in the Caribbean, this is like a great opportunity for us as an island to really lead the way in conservation of this ecosystem. And it's an opportunity for us to inspire other islands to follow suit. So, there's two routes we could take of either destruction or preservation, and that is what will really inspire other countries worldwide with mangrove ecosystems.
Yeah, and think about it, like, imagine walking around with, like, the notoriety of saying that, yes, our country, our island, has the largest continuous mangroves in the region. That alone should be motivation. And the idea of this, of having a very unique face to the island that you cannot necessarily find anywhere else in the Caribbean region, is enough motivation for us to be leaders in preservation and conservation of all of our terrestrial and subterrestrial and marine life, and an understanding of, like, why mangroves is so integral to so many things in our daily lives that we might not see, like, immediately, but, like, these things will impact us much closer than we thought in the future. Could be the next 5 years, next 10 years, and so on, at least within our lifetime. And I think that should be something that we should walk around with pride, that, like, that's a very cool thing to say. It might not seem like a very big thing, but it is quite awesome to say that, yeah, we have the largest continuous mangroves in the Caribbean region, and not many places can say things like that.
Yeah, that sounds like some Cayman kind to me right there.
Yeah, hashtag the real Cayman kind.
I love it. And, like, we could also apply to have it as a UN heritage site. Like, there's no reason it couldn't be a heritage site. It's already protected from being entered from the western side, like the marine protected area. So you're really not allowed to go in it anyway, so it could just be preserved.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, the opportunities for our mangrove wetland to become a long-term ecology research site, that's also another thing worldwide, that areas can be protected for ecological research. And this was actually, I believe it was applied for, but has been denied. So it's actually a really great thing that could be a really great thing for our island, both environmentally and economically as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Soleil. This application, if I'm thinking of the same one, this one has to be either put forward or approved by the governing body, correct?
It does, yes.
Okay. So this is a bit of a call to action for anyone listening to the podcast, that if this is something that aligns with you or something you would like to see happen, be sure to reach out to your MP, your representative in your district or sub-district or whatever, whoever's listening, either in or outside the island, that this is something that we should be considering, especially with all these policies and plans going out for the next 10 to 30 years, that this should be something that needs to be included and be put at the forefront. All of this, I'm hearing the same buzzword over and over: conservation, preservation. And obviously we've seen kind of a contradictory, let's say, thing that's happening on island with a lot of rapid development, of mass development, to say, on island. And one of the big things that not many people might know of, or there might be a lot of people who know of, and that's the infamous East West Arterial. And I know that the Wetlands Thrive, Life Survives campaign is kind of surrounding that conversation. If you want to talk more about that, Hayley.
Absolutely. So the reason the campaign is targeting the East West Arterial Road extension is because of the magnitude of the size of the road and the areas that it will affect. And because, I guess we were talking about mangroves before and kind of how they work. Mangroves need to be in a forest. They can't be isolated, and they actually require seasonal flooding and things like that. So they need free-flowing water. And as we were saying before, it's extremely important to crab season. The seasonal flooding is where the crabs lay their eggs. So if it's going to be built in a way that's sustainable to ensure that the seasonal flooding continues and that the mangroves aren't cut off from each other, so a thing that we've been concerned about is when the road was first proposed, it was proposed very far north from the communities, more than it really needed to be. And so the mangroves in between the roads, I don't think that section of the forest would really be able to survive because they'll be isolated, and if it's not built properly, the flood water will not be able to reach them. And so that would just kill it off and decrease the acreage of the central mangrove wetlands. So we just want to ensure that the road is being built properly and that it's accounting for storm surges, the different kinds of seasonal flooding that needs to occur for the different forms of wildlife and endemic species that need it to survive. And also decreasing mangroves in general is increasing the geographical risk to sea level rise. So we just wanted to make sure that, these things are being considered when the road will be built. The road is happening. There's been some controversy around our position on the road, and as Sustainable Cayman, we're aware that the road is happening. We talked to government about it. We're not anti East West Arterial Road extension because it is happening. And so we just want to make sure that the public is aware and that their opinion is valued and that the natural environment is prioritized due to all of the reasons we've said before. Like, it's extremely vital culturally, socially, and economically to the livelihoods of everyone on the island. If the road is built incorrectly or without the environment prioritized, it will decrease the area of sensitive habitat for endemic species. And the reason that that's detrimental is because the central mangrove wetlands right now is somewhat of a protection for a lot of endemic species. And if we deforest some of it, it's opening up the inner part of the forest that's never been touched before to invasive species that will be hard to manage because it's hard to get into the mangroves. It's very thick. It's an unforgiving environment to really trek through. And so it'll be hard to manage once it happens and is opened up to development. And species such as the green iguanas and feral cats could get in and really decimate the very few native species we have left in the forest.
Yeah, I think that is something that not has always been in the forefront of my mind, but, you know, when we think of the development of roads, we just think about the vegetation itself being impacted, not considering the fact that all these invasive animals can get easy access now into the innermost part of the mangroves, which has probably not seen any human activity, right, at all for how long caimans existed, and introducing all these other outside threats. And it's not necessarily like, you know, a green iguana attacking a special plant or decimating plants or disrupting insect life and whatever in the mangroves, but the fact that, like, they're bringing all kinds of diseases, right, that other plants or other animals have not been introduced to, potentially putting all these other animals on the endangered list in the future. And, you know, it is our not only our social responsibility, but it is our utmost responsibility to make sure that not only are we preserving mangroves in our wetlands or just our forests in general, but protecting any species of animals we might not have identified yet in the mangroves.
Yeah. I think when we talk about invasive species as well, it's very important to also recognize that the most invasive species here in Cayman is humans.
Real.
Opening up with the East West Arterial extension is an access route for us. It's an access route for us to affect wildlife and an access route for us to allow more development in the mangroves. And, you know, not only do we bring ourselves into those environments, we bring any other invasive species, invasive diseases. Destruction follows us as humans, and it's unfortunate that we are the invasive species to Cayman. So that's also important to notice when we talk about invasive species, is that us just being there is a threat to nature itself.
Yeah. I know that, I think it was a while back that Sustainable Cayman actually proposed a alternative route to the original route, and I think there were other routes proposed. Like, if you want, you can share more details on that, of those who probably don't even know there are alternatives to the proposed route, and, like, how this would either mitigate or reduce the amount of harm from that original proposal.
Yeah, so Sustainable Cayman, with the help of RSPB. So for those who don't know, RSPB stands for the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, and it's a charity that helps to restore, protect, and care for places our wildlife call home. So Sustainable Cayman and RSPB researched and proposed 2 alternative routes to the original route that was proposed by the NRA. If you look on our website, or the NRA website actually, you can see the routes we proposed were considered in the EIA assessment, which is still underway. The reason we proposed 2 alternative routes was because the original route proposed went very north of the communities in Savannah and Lower Valley and Town, where the road will be eventually built. And so because it was more north, it would be more devastating and cause more destruction and acreage lost to the mangrove forest. So what Sustainable Cayman did was that we proposed a route that would be a little more south and decrease the acreage and disruption to the central mangrove wetlands. 2 of the 4 proposed routes we have estimated will deforest at least 174 acres of the central mangrove wetland to make way for this road. And history teaches us that where roads go, development follows, and that will result in fragmenting habitats and displacing habitats.
I know that you had, or there was a pop-up at Hurley's several weeks back of getting feedback from the public about the East West Arterial. And I remember we talked about it, that some people didn't know it was even happening or was a thing. Some people did. Some people had a lot of support for it. Some people were just like, why the heck are we doing this, right? Like, how is this going to benefit me anyway? Considering that there are alternative options to just building a road, or either just have the road, but what is the follow-up plan? Like, is there going to be any other existing public transit infrastructure onto this that's going to alleviate the traffic woes that we're having today? And why people should be concerned about the mangroves if this road is going down.
I actually heard a really unique piece of feedback, and this person shared with me why, if they're building the road through the mangrove, why is another piece of land somewhere else not being restored? So kind of like, if they're going to cut down this many acres, why would you not offset the damage to kind of restore another area of the island that could have a similar habitat? And I think, that's a really great idea. At the very least, if nothing gets done, that would be nice. Obviously, our goal with the alternative routes is to just decrease the acreage of the forest, but I also think it would be a great idea to compensate any acreage that's lost in another place. So that was one piece of feedback that I hadn't heard before, and so I wanted to share that.
That's very creative feedback, very out of the box thinking.
Yeah, and the other feedback we got was, well, I guess a lot of people, first of all, didn't know about the road. I want to say like 90% of people didn't know about the road, but we didn't actually do a poll of like, who knows about the road and who doesn't. So I'm just guesstimating, and this was a specific time of day, This is not a very like quantitative assessment. This is just my impression of the feedback of the people we did talk to. And so most people didn't know about it. And so after some, I guess, sharing, people have heard or at least know about the area of the road that's already kind of been filled in at the current bit. So where they would start to construct, that's already kind of begun. So people were familiar with that, but they did not know the extent of where the road would go. And so we had some maps to show everyone using the Sustainable Cayman alternative routes on one map. And then we used the official NRA website maps to show how they're portraying the routes. So I guess those are the official routes. And I think people were kind of shocked at, I guess, the magnitude of the loss that would happen. And we did have a few facts from our original optioneering report that also surprised people. Proposing the route more south would actually save money for the road being built, because we can already access a few points without the need to create more roundabouts, more legs outside of, in the middle of nowhere currently. A lot of the questions that we had were around the reason for the road, and I think that's a really important thing that the NRA needs to address themselves, because right now our impression of the reason and the purpose for the road being built is to alleviate traffic. And that is thus far the only explanation that's been given. However, past examples of roads in Cayman being built have shown that the more roads that are being built haven't reduced traffic, and instead it's encouraged more cars to be on the road, which has in turn increased traffic. So a lot of the feedback that we got was around that and the reasoning for a road to alleviate traffic when, if nothing else is being done, it will actually have the opposite effect. It will actually increase the amount of cars on the road again. So I did meet with planning to kind of talk about this and ask about if, the road was going to be built in consideration for public transportation, which was another large piece of feedback we got. Why are we not focusing on public transit to solve our traffic problems? And so we still don't have any answers to that. However, there should be a lane for buses included in the East West Arterial road extension. So I'm happy with that. That's a positive step in the right direction because, as we've said before, the road is being built. It's nothing against the road anymore. It's about making the road sustainable for future generations. And if they're going to be doing a new public transportation reformation, then the road needs to be built accounting for these changes in the future. And yeah, another reason we wanted the public feedback, just to hear, do people want public transportation? What would they want it to look like? I guess this isn't public transportation, but another piece of feedback we received was having all of the schools in Cayman use buses for the kids, not just public schools, but also private, because of, I guess, geographically where all of the private schools kind of conglomerate in one central area, which is also the most heavily populated for where people work. And so because of that, a lot of the parents actually that we spoke to really, really emphasized the difference between traffic during the school year versus the summer. And so that would be an easy fix to kind of, well, maybe not easy, but a fix that could be a lot faster than however long it's going to take to build this road. For example, the East West Arterial Road extension EIA consultation has been going on for over a year. It's been extended and extended and extended, so there's no real telling when the road will actually begin being built. So why are we not thinking of alternatives? Not even alternative routes, but alternatives to solving the traffic problem.
Yeah. It's honestly really funny that this one thing that we keep talking about, the East West Arterial, ends up coming back to the same solution everyone's talking about, and that's just reform of our public transit or finding alternative forms of transportation that isn't car-centric. And you touched upon it, which was all roads ends up having more cars in a road, right? I'm no city planner, I'm no civil engineer, I'm no urban planner as well, but that is a general principle that, if you create more lanes, that means more cars in the road, and more cars in the road means more congestion and traffic. Those things do not equal each other in terms of, we're going to create more roads in Cayman, so therefore that's going to alleviate all traffic, when all traffic still ends up at the same points, like in front of Grand Harbor, the Thompson Roundabout, all these different places. I would really find it interesting if they can do a case study of how the West Bay Highway, from time to day of the old West Bay Road and the new highway, how much that has impacted traffic in any way. as a West Bay myself and used to live in West Bay and so on, the same issues are slowly creeping up in West Bay that is happening on the east side due to more people moving to the west and so on. So are they like going to, end up applying the same solution here, which is let me build more roads in West Bay to get more people into town, right? When it's not necessarily that like roads is not the solution here. Like if you build roads, and as you said earlier, is that they just go A to B, but it needs to be development on the side of it, right? And that's the issue here with that original proposal, is that the further north of it, that you're going to have all these mass development creating this more division in the mangroves and disrupting habitats, and human activity and so on is going to be impacting all this very complex mechanism that the mangroves play a part of.
Yeah, and I guess it does lead back to this question that's not even just a Cayman question, it's a global question of, how do we build less roads? How do we control population growth and manage population growth without more development and destruction? And I think that is really something, like, of course, we as Sustainable Cayman have proposed alternative routes. We're not saying don't build a road. We're not saying that's the only option. It's just, if we're building a road, we also need to look at how we're going to make that road approachable and adaptable for further situations. Within the last 5 years, we've seen a growth of 18,000 people in Cayman. 5 years. And it's not slowing down anytime soon, as we can see.
Yeah.
And the more people that come, the more cars there are going to be until there's alternatives for transit. So I think at the end of the day, this, it all comes back to this question of when will Cayman have a real functioning public transit system?
Absolutely. And I think going back to the original question that everybody had at the pop-up, again, like, why are we building the road? Like, are we trying to solve traffic, or what is the purpose for the road? And the flip side of why the road is potentially being built is to increase development in that area of Cayman, opening it up to development. And do Caymanians want that? That is another completely different question, but we just don't really know why the road is being built. We don't know if there's an alternative agenda. If it's not going to alleviate traffic, then why are we doing it? Again, not anti-road, but just it being more transparent to the community. Like, how can we give our opinion on something if we don't know why it's being done? So that was a really difficult thing to navigate at our pop-up, because we're just here to offer alternative routes, but people want answers, like bigger answers from the government, like, why is this road being built? And it's very concerning that they're not going to engage with the public until the 6-week consultation that's required of the EIA. I think people need to be aware of this much longer before they're being asked their opinion. Like, people need information to make educated answers and opinions about something, especially something that is so big and devastating to the natural environment and also the communities that it will be nearby. Like, do people in those areas actually want that?
Right. In terms of the time frame of this public consultation period, I guess, around the EIA and like about the proposed plan that people should be aware of.
Yeah, so right now, the EIA is still being conducted. There is unfortunately no deadline that I can share. I know that we're waiting for the hydrology report to be completed. Everyone that's been working at Sustainable Cayman has been in contact with the respective steering committee members and consultants, trying to find these answers so that we can share with the public what we know. But unfortunately, we do not have a timeline anymore. The last timeline we were given was February. It's May. We haven't heard anything. And so A key part of the EIA is hydrology, which I mentioned earlier, the flooding and the risks to flooding. So the hydrology report, which we believe is the last thing to be done, is going to be one of the most essential pieces because, as I said, there may be a high risk of flooding depending on the way the road is constructed. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a deadline to share with people, but just to follow along with the campaign and be up to date with, I guess, the NRA website, that's really the only place that you can access information. I do know they update the website quite regularly. However, I don't know if people know that the website is there. So please go and look at the NRA website, read about how they're conducting the EIA. It's all there. It's all public information. And we just want to share that with everyone so that everyone can be involved in the decision-making process of where the road is built and how it's built.
Yeah, I do think this all ties back to another, obviously, large-scale issue that we see again and again in Cayman of, the community not being sure where to find information and the community not being sure of when even consultations take place. And it's really important for us as a community and as an island all together to be aware of the changes that are happening, know where to find that information, and make sure our voices are heard, because unless we say what it is we want to see from our government, they won't know what we want. So we have to make it our goal as a community to stay up to date with when things are informed, because if we are not being informed, we have to do it ourselves. And this is something that we have to band together if we want to see this done in a sustainable way.
Yeah. Community participation is so important in every aspect, and especially in such large-scale infrastructure projects such as this, that it's not just a road, it's everything encompassing this road.
It's important to remember that this not only is your right as a person in a democracy, it's your duty as a person in a democracy to say what it is you want to see from your country. And is this what you want to see? That's the question that everybody has to ask themselves.
Hayley, do you have any closing remarks, any plugs, any last mentions, or anything that our lovely listeners should be aware of in terms of the campaign and everything surrounding the Wetlands Thrive, Life Survives campaign, and anything to do with the East West Arterial?
So I guess I just want to share with the audience to follow along with the Sustainable Cayman Instagram. We do have a Facebook page called Wetlands Thrive, Life Survives. Please go ahead and join it, where we share public feedback on why mangroves are important and any other mangrove-related, East-West Arterial road extension-related updates that we have. As I said before, right now we're kind of just waiting on action from the government. We're doing our best to get the word out, but when things are taking as long as they are, it's hard to keep people engaged. And it's also hard to know, where the timeline is at. Is it happening in 2025? Is it happening in 2026? So I think that could be a little more clearer, and some feedback for the NRA's website, and just keeping more transparency. And again, just touching on what you were saying, Soleil, at the end, who are we doing this for? A lot of people might not know the importance of the mangrove, the central mangrove wetlands. Of course, mangroves are important, but specifically the central mangrove wetlands helps control the weather for all of Grand Cayman and the sister islands. It controls the water cycle, which, I don't know if people have seen on social media, but we've been having severe droughts, and, reducing the mangrove forest will have, I guess, unpredictable impacts on the rest of the islands. We're just not sure how it could affect the water cycle and the weather patterns and our susceptibility to hurricanes and other kinds of storms. So I think it's important for people to know that and just keep that in mind. Like, let's not destroy as much as we have to. Let's keep it down a little bit.
Let's slow it down, or either let's think critically about how we're developing an island. Yeah.
Heard it here, folks. If you want your mango season next year, let's protect the central mangrove wetland.
If you want your crabs.
Yeah, if you want your mango, you want your crabs, you want your breadfruit, anything that you eat on island is all dependent on the mangroves.
Thank you, Hayley, for joining us again and sharing such valuable insights into the Wetlands Thrive Life Survives campaign. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you guys so much for having me, and thank you for the amazing work you do with this podcast. And I'm so honored to be a guest again, and I wish you all the best with your success with Island Echoes podcast, and I hope you guys all listen in to the following episodes.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Island Echoes.
If you would like to read the full optionary report for the East West Arterial, you can find it on our website, sustainablecayman.org. If you want to ask us questions or propose a topic for one of our episodes, you can email us at ambassador@sustainablecayman.org.
For real-time updates and engaging content, you can also follow us on Instagram at sustainableky, on Facebook at sustainable.kman, and on TikTok at sustainablecayman.